What happens when a player meticulously crafted for greatness since birth loses the very fire that was supposed to make him a legend? This is the paradox of a modern genius, a story of incredible talent and bewildering indifference. To truly understand it, you have to go back to the very beginning. So if you're ready for a story that will make you question everything you think you know about motivation and destiny in football, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't want to miss a second of the life of Eden Hazard. In the Hazard family, football wasn't just a sport. It was the air they breathed, the language they spoke, the very foundation of their existence. It was an all-encompassing reality. Their mother, Corinne, wasn't just a fan. She was a formidable striker in the Belgian women's first division, playing until she was 3 months pregnant with her firstborn, Eden. Their father, Thierry, was a tough-tackling semi-professional defensive midfielder. Football was in their blood, etched into their DNA. So as you can imagine, for their children, there was never really another path. It wasn't a choice. It was an inheritance. The 3 oldest boys, Eden, Thorgan, and Kilian, were born in a tight cluster, only 5 years separating them. This proximity wasn't just a quirk of fate. Their parents saw it as an opportunity, a built-in team, a crucible of competition and camaraderie right there in their own backyard. They would use this closeness to forge their sons into footballers, to fuel the collective dream that one day the name Hazard would echo in stadiums across the world. Their home wasn't just a house. It was the first training ground, the first arena for a dynasty in the making. Then, in the summer of 1998, the world tilted on its axis. On the television screen in their living room, a magician was at work, a French maestro with the grace of a ballet dancer and the vision of a grandmaster. That man was Zinedine Zidane. For the 3 young Hazard brothers, watching him glide across the pitch during that World Cup was a revelation. He became more than an idol. He became an obsession, the benchmark, the ghost they would all chase. Their parents made it explicitly clear, pointing at the screen as Zidane lifted the trophy, that this was their destiny. Their shared goal in life was to one day be as great as him, to sit on his throne. The influence was so profound, so all-consuming, that their parents bought them matching French national team jerseys, each emblazoned with the iconic number 10. They weren't just wearing a shirt, they were wearing a prophecy. While the dream of Zidane was taking root in their hearts, the work had already begun. Eden had been enrolled in the local Stade Brannois Academy since the tender age of 4. There was no time to waste. His parents, driven by a vision of his future stardom, couldn't wait to put him to work to start honing the raw, God-given talent they saw in him. They orchestrated his entire life around the beautiful game. Every need was anticipated, every obstacle removed. They even moved their family home to be just a stone's throw away from a football pitch, ensuring that training wasn't just a scheduled activity, but a daily, hourly possibility. The rhythmic thud of a ball being kicked was the constant soundtrack to their lives. Even if his parents consciously tried to avoid putting overt pressure on their children, their entire environment screamed of expectation. The conversations at the dinner table, the heroes on their walls, the very ground beneath their feet, it was all football. We can never truly know what it felt like for those young boys to carry the weight of such a focused, powerful dream. But it's easy to imagine that for a child, it might have felt suffocating. A gilded cage, where the bars were made of chalk lines and goalposts. Eden would spend another 5 years at Brannois, his talent simmering before the carefully laid plans of his parents propelled him onto a faster track. His first calculated move was a transfer to FC Tubize. This was a step up, a bigger stage planned out by his parents to test his abilities against better competition. But his time there would be incredibly short-lived. Eden didn't just fit in, he exploded. He was a supernova in a field of distant stars. His control, his low center of gravity, his audacious dribbling. It was immediately clear he was operating on a different level. Once the smallest glimmer of a spotlight found him, he was impossible to ignore. Scouts began to murmur his name, and soon one of the biggest clubs in France came calling Lille. The scout from Lille had seen enough in a single game to know this was a generational talent. Knowing he would have to move countries, a significant step for any teenager, Lille didn't hesitate for a second. They drew up an aspiring youth contract, a promise of a pathway to the first team, and made it their mission to personally convince his parents. As you might have guessed by now, Thierry and Corinne Hazard didn't need much convincing. This was the moment they had been working towards since Eden was a toddler. Seeing their son become a superstar was as much their dream as it could ever have been his. The handshake was firm, the deal was done, and young Eden was on his way to France. Luckily, even though Eden was now far from the immediate daily influence of his parents, the primary architects and motivators of his journey so far, his talent was a force of nature powerful enough to carry him forward. He didn't just cope with the change, he thrived. At the tender age of 16, just 2 years after arriving in a new country and a new culture, he was promoted to Lille's B team. That first season of senior-level football was a resounding success. The step up in physicality and pace barely registered. Hazard, with his mesmerizing dribbling and incisive passing, was the creative hub of the team, helping his squad finish first among all other reserve squads in their tier. These electrifying performances were impossible to ignore. The first team manager began to take notice, and soon Eden was rewarded with his first few precious minutes with the senior side. It was a tantalizing glimpse of the future, and by the following season, he had made the leap for good. He was a permanent member of the first team squad. But even as his star ascended, a significant worry began to fester among the club's hierarchy. They saw a young man who was almost preternaturally gifted, yet seemed unmotivated. He lacked that relentless, burning drive to push himself beyond his comfort zone. It was a baffling contradiction. The club, desperate to unlock the full, terrifying potential they knew was lurking within him, took the unusual step of flying his parents in for a meeting. In a sterile boardroom, the club directors sat across from Eden and his parents. They questioned his mother Corinne about her son's so-called lack of enthusiasm, his casual approach to what they considered a sacred profession. She turned her expression a mixture of confusion and concern, and looked directly at her son. "Eden," she asked, her voice cutting through the tension in the room, "is that true?" Without a flicker of emotion, without shifting in his seat, the young man looked back at his mother and the assembled board members and gave a simple, devastatingly honest reply. "Yes, it is. What do you do with an answer like that?" Here's a teenager on the cusp of greatness, admitting he lacks the fire everyone expects him to have. Do you see it as a red flag? Or just the blunt honesty of a kid who sees the game differently? Let me know what you make of that moment in the comments below. It feels like a key that unlocks so much of what's to come. Now at only 17 years old, Hazard was establishing himself as a key rotation player for Lille. He was also earning call-ups to the Belgian national team, a squad desperate to claw its way back to relevance, after decades of underachievement since their golden generation of the 1980s. Throughout that debut season, Hazard made his mark. He managed to contribute a goal or an assist every 169 minutes, incredibly promising numbers for a teenager finding his feet in a top European league. His presence on the pitch, that spark of unpredictability he provided, was essential. He was the catalyst for Lille's late-season push that secured them a spot in the Europa League. In the process, he became the club's youngest-ever goal scorer and, remarkably, the league's first-ever foreign player to win the Young Player of the Year award. And just like that, after one single season of professional football, the Sharks began to circle. The scent of blood, or rather generational talent, was in the water. calls flooded into the Lille front office from the giants of European football. Inter Milan, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Manchester United. Every single one of them was inquiring about Eden Hazard's availability. But Eden, in a move that showed a surprising maturity, decided he wanted to stay. He felt he needed at least one more season at Lille to continue his development. And besides, something incredible had happened. Something that validated his entire childhood. Zinedine Zidane, his hero. The man on the posters in his bedroom not only knew who he was, but had personally recommended him to the board of Real Madrid. The dream was no longer a distant fantasy. It was becoming a tangible possibility. The following season, Hazard picked up right where he left off. He was absolutely pivotal in the Europa League playoffs, scoring crucial goals in both rounds to ensure their passage to the group stage. Then, in the first 3 matches of the group stage, he delivered a goal contribution in each one, putting the team in a commanding position to advance. Domestically, he was the driving force behind Lille's most credible title challenge in recent memory. But it was always on the European stage, under the bright lights of the Europa League, where he truly shone. And the round of 16 match against Liverpool would be his masterpiece. For 90 minutes, he was simply unplayable. He tore Liverpool's experienced defense to shreds. It was breathtaking to watch what this teenager, this slip of a boy, was doing to seasoned professionals like Jamie Carragher. He'd receive the ball, and the whole stadium would hold its breath in anticipation. Feinting one way, exploding the other, leaving defenders tangled in his wake. He was a whirlwind of creative energy, constantly carving out chances for his teammates. But as the clock ticked down, the score remained level. So in the 83rd minute, Hazard decided to take it all upon himself. Standing over a long-range free kick, he struck the ball with a perfect blend of power and finesse, sending it soaring into the back of the net. It was a stunning goal that secured another famous victory for Lille. Unfortunately, a humbling 3-0 defeat in the second leg at Anfield saw them crash out of the competition. But the season was far from a failure. Hazard helped his team come agonizingly close to qualifying for the Champions League. And on a personal level, he was once again recognized for his brilliance. He was nominated for the Senior Player of the Season award, and for the second year in a row won the Young Player of the Season award, the first player ever to achieve that feat. As the next season began, however, it seemed for a moment that the fairy tale might be unraveling. Hazard was handed a starting position, the undisputed creative fulcrum of the team, but a patch of inconsistent form saw him surprisingly drop to the bench. The coach Rudy Garcia cited his inconsistency as too big a risk for the team's ambitions. It was a public challenge. Hazard himself admitted he was going through a rough patch, a dip in confidence. But whatever was disturbing him, he managed to shake it off. He fought his way back into the starting lineup, and when he returned, he was a man possessed. His partnership with the Ivorian forward Gervinho became the stuff of legend in Ligue 1 that season. The duo was a defensive nightmare, a blur of pace skill and telepathic understanding. They were utterly unpredictable, and no defense in France had an answer for them. Together, they spearheaded an incredible title charge, leading Lille to become French champions for the first time in 57 long years. The city erupted in celebration, and at the heart of it all was their Belgian diamond. Hazard was now cemented as a club legend. That season brought him his first league title, his first Senior Player of the Season award, making him the youngest ever to receive it, and an incredible tally of 18 goals and assists in 38 league matches. One of those goals, a blistering 35-yard strike that flew into the top corner against their title rivals Marseille, was perhaps the best of his career to date. To cap off a perfect season, they also won the Coupe de France, remarkably beating the newly rich PSG 1-0 in the final. They had achieved the domestic double. It seems absurd looking back that Hazard still refused to leave Lille at this point. The biggest clubs in the world were practically begging him to sign. But he had one last piece of unfinished business. He wanted to hear that iconic anthem to test himself on the ultimate stage, the Champions League. In his final season at Lille, Hazard was finally handed the number 10 shirt. And trust me when I tell you, a new version of Hazard emerged that year. Now 20 years old, he had evolved. He was no longer just a prodigious talent. He was a dominant world-class force playing on a whole new level of existence. The Champions League campaign itself would end in disappointment. Despite earning a respectable 6 points in a tough group, Lille somehow finished last, failing even to qualify for the Europa League. But everywhere else, in every domestic competition, we witnessed the full, terrifying power of this new Hazard. PSG, now flush with Qatari cash, had begun their project of total domination. But Lille and a spirited Montpellier side seemed determined to spoil their party. And Hazard appeared to relish the role of spoiler-in-chief. In the first half of the season alone, he racked up an astonishing 13 goals and assists in 19 league matches, as Lille trailed just 1 point behind the league leaders. His performances ignited an all-out transfer war. Every major club in the Premier League, Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham, entered a frantic bidding race for his signature. And honestly, Hazard seemed to love every second of the attention. Because if the first half of his season was good, the second half was simply ungodly. It was a sustained run of form that bordered on the supernatural. In the final 19 matches of the season, he only failed to register a goal or an assist in 5 of them. He accumulated a staggering 23 goal contributions in those 19 games. That's a goal or an assist every 73 minutes. It was an open audition for the title of the best player in the world, and he was passing with flying colors. He decided to finish his time at Lille in the most Hazard way imaginable. The night before the final match of the season, with his team playing against Nancy, he went out for a big farewell party with his teammates. The party extended far later and got far wilder than it should have. By the next morning, as they prepared for the game, he was still drunk. His teammates exchanged worried glances as he stumbled onto the pitch. But then, the whistle blew. By the 30th minute, a still inebriated Eden Hazard had scored the first hat-trick of his professional career. It was a perfect, audacious, almost mythical goodbye. A proper send-off in proper Hazard fashion. Finally, the transfer saga reached its conclusion. A deal was struck with Chelsea for £32 million. He was heading to the Premier League, the newly crowned champions of Europe. His first taste of action with his new club would be the Club World Cup, though they would suffer a disappointing loss in the final to Corinthians. But back in England, surrounded by world-class players like Frank Lampard, Fernando Torres, Oscar, and Juan Mata, Hazard had more than enough talent to combine with. He enjoyed a spectacular debut season, racking up 13 goals and an incredible 24 assists across all competitions, averaging a goal contribution every 120 minutes. Chelsea would finish third in the league and go on to win the Europa League, though Hazard, frustratingly, would miss the final due to injury. That season also became notorious for a bizarre incident where he got into a confrontation with a Swansea City ball boy. Furious that the boy was holding on to the ball to waste time, Hazard kicked him in an attempt to dislodge it, earning himself a red card and a media firestorm. It was a moment of petulance that hinted at the fiery temper beneath the cool exterior. By the end of that first year, his legendary teammate Frank Lampard summed it up perfectly. He said, "I've said to him, he has got absolutely everything. He's only 22, he has the world at his feet. And with the way he's playing and the ability he has on the ball, he's scaring the life out of people." What a journey just to get to the Premier League, right? And the story only gets more intense from here. We've seen him rise, answer his critics, and win titles. If you love deep dives into the careers of football's most iconic figures, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We have so many more legends to explore, from tactical geniuses to misunderstood mavericks, and you won't want to miss a single one. Now fully acclimated to the brutal pace and physicality of the Premier League, and playing under the famously demanding Jose Mourinho, Hazard was no longer just one of the stars of the team. He was the star. The creative engine, the match winner, the man they looked to when they needed a moment of magic. As they faced Bayern Munich in the European Super Cup, Hazard delivered a classic performance, scoring one magnificent solo goal and assisting the other, dragging his team to a penalty shootout where they would unfortunately lose. By the end of the calendar year, Hazard had repeatedly stepped up in crucial matches, delivering decisive moments against top rivals. His brilliance earned him his first ever nomination for the Ballon d'Or, and high praise from his notoriously hard-to-please manager. Mourinho publicly called him the best young player in the world. Over the rest of the season, he would score some hugely important goals in all competitions. But ultimately, Chelsea would come up empty-handed, falling just short on every front. There were whispers of tension between Mourinho and Hazard. The manager was reportedly frustrated with Eden's defensive work rate and believed he wasn't yet ready to take on the full responsibility of being the team's undisputed leader. Despite this, by the end of the season, Hazard's individual brilliance was undeniable. He won the PFA Young Player of the Year award and finished second in the voting for the main PFA Player of the Year award, just behind a rampaging Luis Suarez. In a huge show of confidence, the club also handed him the iconic number 10 shirt previously worn by his friend and creative partner, Juan Mata. That summer, Hazard took part in his first major international tournament, the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. Belgium, with its so-called golden generation, had finally qualified for a major tournament and carried the weight of national expectation. They would make it to the quarter-finals before being knocked out by Argentina. But Hazard himself had a relatively modest tournament by his own high standards. He was good, but not great, not yet the dominant force for his country that he was for his club. Back at Chelsea, there was no more space for excuses or near misses. With new signings like Cesc Fabregas and Diego Costa, the team was built to win, and Hazard had to deliver. And deliver he did. He was the catalyst for an absolutely dominant season. Chelsea stormed through the league, and Hazard was a primary reason they made it all the way to December without suffering a single defeat. He had solidified himself as the critical edge that transformed a proficient, powerful Chelsea team into an extraordinary one. Through each mesmerizing dribble, he sprinkled a bit of stardust onto every match, illuminating the path to goal for his teammates. He was a force of nature. By the end of the season, his extraordinary and consistent performances meant that Chelsea were Premier League champions. And at last, Hazard was crowned the PFA Player of the Year. He was officially the best player in England. He was on top of the world. It is still to this day almost impossible to wrap my head around what happened next. The following season was nothing short of horrendous for Hazard. It was a collapse so total, so inexplicable, that it remains one of modern football's greatest mysteries. He went completely missing. He embarked on an insane, confidence-shattering dry spell that saw him score his first league goal of the season on the 35th match day. By that point, Chelsea were languishing in mid-table, trailing the league leaders by a staggering 28 points, and Jose Mourinho had already been sacked. It is a massive understatement to say it was a season to forget. Hazard surely knew it too, and his frustration bubbled to the surface when he publicly stated that it would be hard to say no to a potential move to PSG. This is where the paradox of Eden Hazard comes into sharp focus. You have to realize that he was far from the clean-cut, media-trained personality you might expect from a child with his meticulously planned upbringing. He notoriously struggled with fitness, often returning from summer breaks overweight. His application in training was famously poor. He lacked the vocal chest-thumping mentality of a traditional leader. In many ways, he was closer to the stereotype of a mercurial South American artist who learned to play on the beach with his friends than a Belgian project child forged in a crucible of discipline. And this was incredibly hard for the public and the media to understand. They kept poking him with a stick, expecting a reaction, expecting him to just do something to pull his team out of its nosedive. In a way, he seemed like the classic case of a kid with helicopter parents who finally gets to college, lets loose, and completely loses any sense of discipline and focus that had been so rigorously instilled in him. The enthusiasm, the joy seemed to be gone, replaced by a sullen indifference. Perhaps deep in his subconscious, his relationship with the sport he had been pushed into during his childhood had turned sour. Regardless, he decided to stay at Chelsea. And when Antonio Conte, a manager whose intensity is the stuff of legend, took over, it's hard to comprehend how quickly the team, including Hazard, turned things around. By October, Hazard had already matched his entire goal tally from the previous disastrous season. He looked sharp, motivated, and happy again. From October to April, that rejuvenated Chelsea team suffered just one single defeat in the league. They were a machine. As Chelsea won the league with an incredible 93 points, everyone was in awe of this spectacular comeback. And as much as Hazard's return to world-class form had helped, many questioned what came first, the chicken or the egg. They proposed that the real difference-maker, the true catalyst for the turnaround, had been the signing of the indefatigable N'Golo Kanté from Leicester City. As the voting for Player of the Year arrived, it was clear that public opinion saw Kanté, the humble, all-conquering midfielder, as the more decisive of the two. Nevertheless, it had been a hugely positive year for Hazard. He was a champion again. The 2017-2018 season felt like a transitory one. Despite a fantastic individual return of 30 goals and assists and an FA Cup title, Hazard couldn't drag Chelsea to a Champions League spot or any kind of remarkable international campaign. In a way, it felt like a step sideways at best, as if he was gathering his energy, preparing for the monumental leap he was about to take in the coming months. At the 2018 World Cup in Russia, Hazard was appointed captain of Belgium. And maybe, just maybe, that was the final piece of the puzzle, the key to unlocking his ultimate potential. Handed the responsibility of leading his nation's greatest ever collection of talent, he rose to the occasion magnificently. Over the group stage, Hazard was involved in a goal every 52 minutes, making it incredibly easy for his teammates as they breezed into the knockout rounds. In the round of 16 against Japan with Belgium, staring at a shock defeat, he assisted the crucial goal that tied the match and sparked a famous comeback. The quarter-final against Brazil would be perhaps the most iconic performance of his entire career. He completed a staggering 10 dribbles in the match, a feat that hadn't been achieved at a World Cup since 1966. On a pitch he shared with Neymar, he was unequivocally the best player. His creative exploits, his ability to carry the ball under pressure and relieve the strain on his defense, were fundamental to Belgium's famous victory. It was a massive statement in the long-running Hazard versus Neymar debate. In that moment, there was no debate. In the semi-finals, they would finally taste defeat, losing a tight tactical battle to the eventual champions France. But their tournament wasn't over. In the third-place playoff, Hazard secured another man-of-the-match performance, his third of the tournament, the most of any player, and scored a goal to cap off a brilliant individual campaign. He finished with 5 goal contributions and was awarded the Silver Ball as the tournament's second-best player. He had arrived on the world's biggest stage. This incredible performance at the World Cup set the stage for what was to come. It was clear from the get-go that the 2018-19 season would be a special one. This felt like the final piece of the puzzle, the last chapter in his Chelsea legacy before his inevitable dream move. Starting in August, he went on an incredible streak of 11 goals and assists in just 9 matches. He was playing with a joy and a freedom that we hadn't seen in years. After a brief layoff with a thigh problem, He came back and immediately embarked on another streak, this time notching 8 goals and assists in 6 matches. He was in the form of his life, a man at the absolute peak of his powers. If you could share this story with one friend who you argued with about who was better in their prime, Hazard, Neymar, or someone else, who would it be? Tag them or share this video. It's moments like that World Cup that make these debates so much fun. As the second half of the season rolled around, he carried that form onto the international stage, joining Belgium for their European qualification quest, scoring or assisting in every single one of the 4 matches he played. And then finally, the cherry on top of a magnificent season. He joined Chelsea for their Europa League run, a tournament from which he had largely been spared during the group stages. He was prominent throughout the knockout phase, assisting the crucial goal in the second leg of the semi-final that took the tie to penalties. And then came the final against their London rivals, Arsenal. After a tense goalless first 45 minutes, Hazard decided to take over the match completely. He was unplayable. He shook the game to life, scoring 2 goals and assisting another. It was a masterful, commanding performance that naturally earned him the Man of the Match award as Chelsea ran out 4-1 winners. It was his second Europa League title, a perfect farewell gift to the club, where he had become a legend. In the post-match interview, with the confetti still falling around him, Hazard strongly insinuated that it was perhaps his last ever time playing for Chelsea. He'd done it all. He'd won it all. Just 7 days later, the news the world had been waiting for finally broke. Real Madrid made his transfer public for a sum of $100 million, making him one of the most expensive players of all time. The world watched mesmerized as 50,000 fans packed into the Santiago Bernabeu to watch Eden Hazard, their new Galactico, put on Ronaldo's iconic number 7 shirt. We were all en route to witness his prime, the coronation of a king. This was the moment for Hazard to cement himself as an all-time great. Even if he managed just a fraction of what Ronaldo had achieved in that shirt, he would have left his mark on football history forever. But as he stood on that podium, waving to the adoring crowd, one problem was quite noticeable to the keen-eyed observer. Hazard looked unfit. He seemed heavier, less sharp than the player we had just seen tear a World Cup and a Europa League final apart. In hindsight, it seems that was the first ominous sign of the unmitigated disaster that was about to ensue. Before the league season even started, the first injury struck. A hamstring issue. 25 days was his sentence. A frustrating start, but nothing too alarming. As he came back, he played for 13 matches, struggling to find his rhythm to adapt to a new league and a new system. He managed only 1 goal and 2 assists. It was clear to everyone that he wasn't 100% fit, that something was off. And then it was confirmed. A bruised ankle sustained in a Champions League match turned out to be a hairline fracture. He was left out for 75 agonizing days. It would take only 2 matches after his return before he was back on the sidelines. This time with a fissure in his fibula, another major injury that kept him out for another 76 days. The global pandemic break in 2020 helped offset some of the lost time, giving him a chance to recover. But it wouldn't be the last injury of that cursed season. When it finally ended, Eden Hazard, the 100 million superstar, had scored 1 single goal. And so we arrive at the season that followed, where the nightmare only deepened. Hazard missed even more matches this time, a total of 33, through various ailments. He managed little more than 500 minutes of playing time in La Liga. As the months pass by, the world begins to forget. It forgets the player he was, forgets the expectations we all once had for what he would do at Real Madrid. And to be fair, as you watch him, he doesn't seem very bothered by it all. The most telling image came when Real Madrid were knocked out of the Champions League by his former club Chelsea. As the final whistle blew on his team's defeat, the cameras found him on the pitch, laughing and smiling, sharing jokes with his old teammates. There was no anger, no frustration, no devastation. Just a nonchalant, unbothered shrug. The Hazard way. We may never fully understand how a child raised under such intense, focused guidance could grow up to so conspicuously lack the intensity of someone who lives and breathes to be the very best. How a project designed for perfection could result in such a flawed human and ultimately frustrating genius. But we can surely take our best guesses as to why. And that's where this incredible, perplexing football story concludes for now. What a journey, right? From a prodigy destined for the throne to a king without a kingdom. I am so eager to hear your thoughts on this. What moment in Hazard's career stands out the most to you? Do you think his upbringing is the key to understanding his career, or is it something else entirely? Please share all of your opinions, your favorite moments, and any questions you still have in the comments below. I truly love reading every single one and building this amazing football community with all of you. Thanks for watching.